Hello everyone, welcome to the Langfocus channel and my name is Paul. Today we'll be answering the question, how are British English and American English different? One of the most commonly asked questions by learners of English. And hopefully native speakers of English will learn a thing or two from this video as well. The truth is that both British English and American English have numerous varieties, in other words, various accents and dialects. So for the main part of this video, I'll try to focus on the most standard non-regional variety of each one. Disclaimer, I'm not American, I'm actually Canadian, but I'm confident that we will someday be Americans after the invasion. Standard Canadian English is very close to general American English, so I will say the American English samples myself unless there's some specific need to distinguish between American and Canadian pronunciation. There are several ways in which British English and American English are different. Vocabulary, accent, spelling, and grammar. Vocabulary. Let me just throw a bunch of examples at you. In the US, people generally say garbage or trash, while in the UK, they generally say rubbish, both literally and figuratively.
The game was rubbish.
Americans go on vacation, while Brits go on holiday, and that's also possible in American English. In the US, people rent apartments, while in the UK, they rent flats. In the US, if your apartment is at street level, then you live on the first floor, and the person above you lives on the second floor. In the UK, you live on the ground floor, and the person above you lives on the first floor. If that person above you is unable or just too lazy to take the stairs, in the US, they'd take the elevator. In the UK, they'd take the lift. When you're bored at home, in the US, you might turn on the TV, while in the UK, you would turn on the telly. When you step outside of your building to go for a walk, in the US, you might walk on the sidewalk, while in the UK, you walk on the pavement. And if you're tired of walking, in the US, you might take the subway. In the UK, you take the underground. In the US, it's perfectly okay to wear pants when you're riding the subway. But in the UK, you'd better wear some trousers too, because pants means underpants. And specifically women's underpants are sometimes referred to as knickers in the UK. So when someone overreacts to something, in the US you might say, don't get your panties in a bunch. But in the UK you would say,
don't get your knickers in a twist.
Paul, how dare you be so crude? Now I can't show this video to my 6-year-old students.
Oh, don't even worry about that, they'll just watch it on their phones during recess. Going back to the word pants for a moment, it can also be used in British English as an adjective, meaning something is crappy or it sucks. For example,
that album is pants.
In American English, you might say, that album sucks. Accent. So for the US, I'll try to focus on general American English, and for the UK, I'll try to focus on received pronunciation. These are the accents you're likely to hear on CNN and the BBC, respectively. R sounds. American English is rhotic, meaning that R sounds are always clearly pronounced. British English is non-rhotic, meaning that the R sound is not pronounced unless it's followed by a vowel sound. Listen to the difference. My father's in the car.
My father's in the car.
Let's focus on two words. Father.
Father.
Car.
Car.
Notice that the final R sound is not pronounced in British English. Father ends in a simple schwa vowel, like father. And in car, the vowel sound is lengthened in place of the R sound.
Car.
Now, the thing about British non-rhotic accents that I find pretty wild is something called the intrusive R. That means that people sometimes add an R sound to a word that doesn't actually have one if it's followed by a vowel in the next word. For example, in the sentence, I saw a film. In British English, it sometimes sounds like this.
I saw a film.
So you can hear that there's an R sound connecting saw and ah. I once had a British on-the-job trainer, and I remember she said, hello, my name is Paula and I'll be your trainer today. I remember thinking, Paula? What? You can't say your own name? But it wasn't just her, that was the intrusive R. T sounds. In British English, and again, I must emphasize that I'm talking about the accent referred to as received pronunciation, T sounds are pronounced as hard Ts, in other words, voiceless T sounds. In the US, they sometimes sound like D, an alveolar tap instead of T, an alveolar stop. This normally occurs in an unstressed syllable between two vowel sounds, or between a vowel and a rhotic sound, like an R sound. So in the US, people say butter. In the UK, they say
butter.
In the US, stop fighting. In the UK,
stop fighting.
You may have also noticed that the O sound in the word stop was a little different. Which brings me to O sounds. In the word stop, the American O sound is an unrounded vowel, ah, while the British O sound is rounded, aw. Another example, hot.
Hot.
There's also the O diphthong in the word no. In the UK,
No.
In the UK, the sound is a schwa followed by an as in put. Show.
Show.
A sounds. In other words, sounds represented by the letter A. Ah in UK English normally becomes an a sound in American English. For example, in the UK,
Half.
and in the US, half. Words with a in British English remain pretty similar in American English. In the UK,
Cat.
and in the US, cat. An exception is a small set of words in which the A is followed by a double R, in which case the vowel is pronounced as eh in the US. In the UK,
Marry.
in the US, marry. Because of the difference, in the US, marry and Mary sound the same. Carry and carry sound the same. Spelling. American and British spellings are largely the same, but there are a few notable differences. This is in large part because Noah Webster, whom the Webster Dictionary is named after, made an effort to reform English spelling in the 1700s, in order to make the words spelled the way they sounded. This resulted in some spelling changes in American English. Most, but not all, words that end in RE in the UK end in ER in the US. For example, center, theater, meter, somber. Some words that end in NCE in the UK are spelled with NSE in the US. License, defense, offense. Some words with OU in the UK are spelled with O in the US. Color, favor, honor, labor, etc. The ending ISE became IZE in the US. Organize, apologize. A similar change also occurs in other contexts where the S is voiced. In other words, it makes a Z sound. Analyze, cozy. There are verbs ending with L that take a doubled L in British English when a suffix is added. In American English, there's no double L. Traveled, cancelled, marvelous. If you're wondering how the last one fits in with the others, remember that marvel is a verb, and then an adjectival suffix is added to it. Grammar. There are only very minor grammatical differences between British English and American English. Auxiliary verbs. British people use shall for the future much more than Americans, as well as to ask for advice or an opinion. Some difference in preposition use. In the US, people say on the weekend, but in the UK, they say at the weekend. And in the US, people say different from or different than, but in the UK, they say different from or different to. There are some different past tense forms. For example, in American English, the past tense of the word learn is learned, while in British English, it's more common to say learnt. Actually, both forms are used in either country, but there is more of a tendency towards one form. This is true for other words like dreamed versus dreamt, burned versus burnt, leaned versus leant, etc. Another example. In the US, the past tense of dive is usually dove. In the UK, it's dived. Maybe the American form developed by analogy with drive and drove. Anyways, differences like these are not consistent, but you'll notice some different past tense forms here and there. Past participles. Sometimes past participles have a different form. The most well-known example is for the verb get. In the US, there's get, got, gotten. But in the UK, it's get, got, got. Both forms, got and gotten, have existed since the Middle English period, but gotten has fallen out of use in the UK. Got can be used in American English in the form have got, but with the meaning of have, not have received or have become. I haven't gotten the eviction notice yet.
I haven't got the eviction notice yet.
Alright, let's check a couple more sentences and see what we encounter. In the US, I think we need a lawyer. In the UK,
I reckon we need a solicitor.
you'll notice that a couple of words here are different. British people often use the word reckon, which means think or suppose. Americans know this word, but rarely use it. And while Americans would typically refer to a professional legal consultant as a lawyer, in the UK they often say solicitor, which is a type of lawyer that does consultation. The type of lawyer who represents you in court in the UK is usually a barrister, while in the US they're usually referred to as attorneys. Another sentence. In the US, I'm going for a beer with my friends. In the UK,
I'm going for a pint with my mates.
Notice that British people often say pint, where Americans would say beer. Brits also say beer as a countable noun like this, but pint is frequently used. And notice that Brits often say mate, where Americans would say friend. The differences between British English and American English might seem surprising or amusing, but remember, in this video I'm zooming in on the differences and focusing on them. For the most part, they're actually the same. There are some minor differences in vocabulary, in pronunciation, in grammar, and in spelling, but any native speaker with a little bit of exposure to the other will quickly adapt to these differences and be able to understand the other variety without any problem. The differences are sometimes greater if we focus on regional dialects and sociolects of British English and American English. While most Americans probably have no trouble understanding received pronunciation, they may have some trouble understanding Cockney English or the Geordie accent of northeastern England or other varieties. But as far as standard non-regional speech goes, I'd say that the differences are minimal. However, learners of English who focus on one of the two varieties will likely have a little bit of trouble understanding the other until they gain significant exposure to it. The question of the day: what other differences between American and British English are you aware of? In this video, I was only able to give a limited number of examples, so add yours in the comments. Be sure to follow LangFocus on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And once again, thank you to all of my wonderful Patreon supporters. And these ones right here on the screen are my top tier Patreon supporters, so many extra special thanks to them. And to everyone out there, thank you for watching and have a nice day.